about methodology in social science. And one of the guys get close to me in the lunch, and he told me he called it excuse me, he named it Alfonso Cinco, like five, Alfonso Cinco. And he told me that he was Asian descendant, and that in Hermosillo, in Sonora, had been a persecution of Chinese in the 19th or 20th of the last century. And I was astonished. I didn't know anything about discrimination against Asians in Mexico until that day, many years ago. And from that moment, I looked for some information about the fact, because no book in my school, in my university, told me anything about that. Now we know that many other acts of discrimination against Chinese were also hide many times until recent days. President López Obrador offer apologize to Chinese government about the massacre of Torreon, May 15, 1911.
Thank you so much.
No, 19, no?
Very good. I mean, Mexico, just like many other parts of the world, had Chinese laborers, had different parts. We have a really large population of Koreans in Mexico, for example. So it's like we talk about kind of China as in the United States, we talk about China as well as like the Asian population, just like we talk about Latinos as Mexican, as the Latino population, right? But we have to remember that Asians are super diverse, right? Super diverse. And yeah, there's been a long history of, how different Asian groups have come to Mexico, what has happened to them once they came to Mexico, and various things like that. And even in those the kind of charts of like how Spanish, merged with indigenous people and became like mestizo, and Spanish merged with black slaves and became mulatto. There are also those same charts that have Asian people in them, and it's not just, oh, if these two mix, they're going to look Chinese, and so we're going to call them Chino. No, there is actually like how Asian people blended with those things, and then what happened to those people, like as far as categories went. So thank you. There's a big history. Thank you, Marciela.
I want to share an experience that I had when I used to work at Telmex. Some years ago, I worked in a special project in which the company hired Chinese people to complete the project. And I remember that it was incredible because Mexican workers like me look up to them because they are so square with their schedules and in the way that they work. So difference to also between us, obviously Mexican workers used to take time for fun, and a difference from them, they were totally focused in their job. And another thing that I want to point out was that at the beginning of the pandemic, I remember that in La Chinesca, you know that there is a community in Mexicali, children suffer from bullying because other children used to bullying them. So I think it was because obviously they listened to their parents or maybe their close people to mention or to comment bad things about Asian people. So I think that it depends on us, for example, adults, because we teach our children, our descendants, the bad thoughts that we have. And that's why I think the government should take urgent steps to avoid racism and this kind of attacks. Because we know that, for example, Donald Trump mentioned that it was the Chinese virus. That comment encourage people to attack them because it's like an example. I think so. And another situation was that I read that a man in Spain was attacked by Spanish people because he was Asian American, and it was only the reason that he suffered from the how can I say the attack in which he is the at the moment when the people hit him is like the noun could be the aggression, something like that.
Okay.
Because the man spent almost 2 weeks in the hospital because he was severely injured. That's why I think the governments should take steps in this. And I would like to say that, for example, in my family, my brother, my siblings, and I always we think about Chinese people like hard workers, and they work a lot and they achieve their goals. And for example, the culture that they have, that they follow to their thoughts, and it is incredible the way that they behave. Because, for example, Mexican people behave totally different, and I think the culture that they have is amazing. That's all.
Thank you. It's funny to me though. Okay, so there's two things. One, because again, you know, you're saying just like Zuri and a little bit like Pablo, that Asian culture is really great. And it's funny to me because we did talk about that a little bit with indigenous cultures, but I don't think anybody said African American culture is great or Black culture is great anytime we talked about it, not once. And so I just want us to kind of take a pause and think, these are the messages and the stereotypes that we've heard, like, you know, like, wow, Asian cultures are so, you know, advanced, and like, you know, the Dalai Lama is so like, you know, like all of these things that we absorb are still stereotypes about people and about their cultures. Okay. And the other thing I wanted to say is about education, because like Pablo said, and like you're saying, like we need to fix the education system, because the lack of information, of historically accurate information about how people arrived in Mexico is a big deal. I think that that gap is really, really important because, and I think it has to do with the kind of the mestizo ideology that, you know, it's like all Mexicans kind of, you know, like became Mexican back 100, 200 years ago. And so now we don't, you know, like there's only either the old school Mexicans that everybody looks the same kind of thing, Pablo, right? Like, you know, because you're mestizo, like it's just, you know, if you look other than kind of mestizo blendish, then you're not Mexican, you're an immigrant, right? Like, so how the immigration happened centuries ago, but still those people are seen as foreigners, right? Within Mexico. Sergio.
Yeah, you know what? I know I look a little bit Asian. And actually, they told me that my genetics, my ascendant is Asian. This person even said that I may be descendant from Genghis Khan because of my phenotype and my size and the sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
And but I have never been called Chino, El Chino, Chinito. Nobody calls me that. But I have sometimes pretended to be someone from Hong Kong. Really, my name for those occasions is Brad Lee. I'm Brad Lee from Hong Kong High. And they buy me that. They buy me that because I know I look a little bit Asian. So on that point, I think one of the misconceptions we have about the Asian people is that we think if you have slender eyes, they're all the same. It's a Chino. No matter it's Japanese, Korean, Mongol, Chinese, or whatever. I think it's the same that the way that the some parts of the society in the U.S. see us, we learn persons, right? Everyone below the Bravo River is Mexican, right? Actually, there is a funny meme about that. You may recall it. The one when some anchors in a news shows said that Trump administration banned 3 Mexican countries. Have you seen that? Look for it. It's very funny. Very funny. Very funny. So I think that we kind of think of the same. No matter where the person is, it's a Chinese, and that's a mistake, right?
Yeah.
I concur with the perception of about they have a great culture, because we tend to believe that Japanese are very smart. Though I had this colleague in a bank that he was Japanese. I think his last name was something like Hiraki, something like that. Yes. But when working with him, you realize that no, he's another person. It's just another person, right? So, okay, to the first question, during the COVID era, I saw before the COVID era, I think like 3 or 4 months before the COVID exploded, I saw this great documentary called Pandemic. It's on Netflix. Look for it. It's very educative. And yeah, they explain how can a strain can start. So yeah, it has to be with what people eat, the interaction that some person have with animals, and yeah, I think that explains a lot, and kind of justifies or not justifies, explains the eruption of that happening in this city in China. And though I don't think I have anything with a different phenotype or another phenotype, I don't recall myself nor my family buying during the lockdown Chinese food. I don't recall that. So I don't know, maybe it was in my subconscious, but I don't think I have an issue with any person from any part of the world.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. You just mentioned this, so like I think the village was called Wakan. I don't know how to pronounce it, but there's one village in China where this wet market was supposed to have happened, and people bought food, and then supposedly this virus spread, and it got really big in that little town and then spread throughout China. Well, China is a huge country, right? It's huge. And so I want you guys to kind of think, like, what if there was, una tianguis that was in, I don't know, Chico, Veracruz, no? This tiny little town, and they got a disease and it spread. And then all of a sudden you heard that it was the Mexico disease. Like, how does that work in our mentality, right? Like, how does that, and how does it like go back to what Zuri said at first of hearing from in our subconscious for a long time, even though Chinese, Asian cultures are great, that Chinese people are dirty. Yeah. How does this reinforce these ideas? Lisbeth.
Yeah, in my case, I didn't notice about these positive ideas about Chinese people. Yes, because in my case, I always think that they are disciplined, they are so smart, intelligent, they are, I don't know, I have ideas about their um, um, system, educational system, but I didn't notice that we tend to generalize their culture in only one. Uh, yeah, it's true. And another thing that I want to to speak is about, for example, we in many cases I know, for example, friends that in many cases make jokes about their pronunciation. For example, with the letter L, for example, me quedé milando, like that. We make jokes about that because they have difficulties in some Spanish words, and we only make laugh for that. Another thing is about, for example, in my case, because of some experience, I admit that because of some experience, I also generalize about their behavior. For example, some Chinese people that are so hungry, I think that, oh, all of them I like that because they have a disciplined education. And I don't know, and when I go to the restaurant, most of the time they are some, I don't know, like how can I say, maleducado? I don't know. And I only generalize that, and I think that all of them I are like that people know. And other thing that I noticed is that when the pandemic started, I had fear about them. For example, here in Mexico, in the downtown, celebrates the Chinese Year. So I didn't go there because I was fear about them. I think that I thought that they contagious me. I don't know if this is correct. That, and that was so bad. I think about this in this moment, and I think, oh no, that's too bad. And what more? Yeah, in about their culture, for example, I heard one history from my partner that told me that in their job, in her job, they have in general some gender inequalities in their job. So we admit that in general they are like that, no? So that is terrible because, like here in Mexico, that we assimilate that all of people are Mexican. It doesn't matter if we are I don't know, sort of indigenous. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we are Nahua or Mixteco, or I don't know. All of them are indigenous people. So it's the same thing, I think. So I try to think about that in order to understand what happened there, because we only see series or movies or I don't know, and we absorb that, and we think that all of them are like that. No, that's all.
Thank you so much. You said so much, and I want to kind of focus on some of it for a second. So one of the things, are these stereotypes that we carry about, Asian people, Chinese people being so smart and so good at math and, all of these things and like their education system. But do you know how much poverty is in China? Do you know how many poor people are in China? Do you think that somebody who lives in a rural area has the same access to education as someone who lives in an urban area. I mean, let's compare a rural town in Mexico to Mexico City, and having, or even Estado de Mexico compared to Mexico City, like just even that close to UNAM, a free education system, how many of those people actually make it to UNAM, compared to the people who were born and raised in Mexico City, right? How many people, and so like education is a big thing. I just want to focus on education for a second, because in China they say that only 5% of people who live in rural China make it to university, compared to 60% of kids who live in urban areas. Okay, that's a huge difference. And so what we see is the people who have access to education, right? And here's another thing that I want you to think about is study abroad. Because China does place, and Asian cultures in a lot of cases do place, a higher value on study abroad, right? So how many Mexicans study abroad? Not very many, right? It's getting more popular in different universities in order to graduate from your program, you need to have some sort of study abroad experience. But a lot of times it's inaccessible financially. And so they say that you can study abroad inside of Mexico. So you can study a semester at a different Mexican university, so it doesn't cost you a lot of money. So that's how Mexico kind of deals with it. But because of the quantity of people from China and other Asian cultures that study abroad in Mexico, in the United States, and parts of Europe, we have this idea that that's what we see, that's the only group of people, right? And so like in the United States, we don't see a lot of Mexicans studying abroad. We see a lot of Mexican migrant workers, right? So it's like the stereotypes are based on the masses that we see, but that doesn't mean Mexico has an incredible education system, an incredible free education system, right? For those that can get there, and there's very, very expensive universities as well, but UNAM is a very high quality education system, and Mexico has produced a lot of great intellectual thinkers, right? China, on the other hand, has a lot of poverty, and there's a lot of people who don't get to go to school. And that doesn't mean that they're dumb. It just means that they have a lack of education that is contrary to what we think about Chinese people and Asian cultures and the greatness of their education system, right? So it's like all of these stereotypes that we carry are amazing when we actually think about them in how we're trained to think about individuals, that everybody, like Sergio says, it's like when you get to know the one person, you realize they are human just like you. They have just as many problems, just as many goals, just as many ups and downs as we do. Oscar.
Yeah. Thank you. Hello, everybody. And what I think about this heritage is that, for instance, like everybody said, is like maybe they are not so they're not well known about the cleanness that they do the things, for instance, food or those things. And another thing is that a stereotype that maybe it's something that is in my mind is that they are a third a nation.
Oscar, give me 2 seconds, please. I don't want to miss what you're saying.
Yeah.
Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Oscar, are you on a store or something? Did you sell?
Yeah.
Yeah. Something about technology?
No. It's many things from China.
Really?
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. A lot of products from there,
Hmm.
and the people,
What do you
Interesting.
sell?
So,
uh, products like
Not
cinchers,
pangolins, right?
pardon?
Not pangolins.
No, no. Chinese food, nah, no.
Sorry, guys. Sorry,
What is it?
my friend just arrived from out of town.
Ah, okay, no problem.
So go ahead, Oscar. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Uh, that maybe the stereotypes that I used to have, I think those are changing as well, and that the for instance we encompasses I encompass all the heritage in Chinese people, and it doesn't matter if they are Japan, Korea, or I don't know what other country, but mainly everybody's from China, and the this region is kind of in a developing process, and they are not well known about the how to use clean on their food or the things that they do. But now that I can see those kind of prejudices, as I sell many things that are mostly from Chinese origins. Almost everything that I sell here, like electrical devices, are from there. And the people said, like, but they are of quality or not. Uh, I used to say China is uh, the manufacturer of those products almost in all the world, and but now I'm to realize, for instance, that the difference between Japan and China, and even with Korea or North Korea, South Korea, and they don't see the, they see themselves different, and for instance, something that happened that I started to think in my mind, maybe I'm wrong, but when I saw the first time that was an outbreak in China, and I was trying to find researching about that, and I saw that they had a laboratory in Wuhan. I think that was the same place where they happened the outbreak, and I was thinking like, it is kind of suspicious, because maybe they maybe I'm wrong, right? But maybe they were working in something like to have this biological weapon and trying to do something, and it was they get get off of their hands, and the and it was an accident, right? But now I think, no, maybe this is wrong, and I shouldn't think about that. But actually, this is crossed to my mind, and but now I realize that yeah, we have a great culture, and for instance, the teachings with the Lao Tse, the ancient culture, and I think those things are changing now in my mind, and I think, no, because there are many conspiracy theories about what happened there, or maybe United States planted that virus there because they are developing economically. And, and I used to hear something like that, like, oh, maybe United States planted that virus, but no, I think not. I think I'm wrong, but those are the things that
It's not that
now I have.
you're wrong. I mean, I appreciate you sharing because you're being honest.
Yeah.
And and I don't think that you're wrong. I just think that you're telling us the misinformation that you received and kind of integrated, and kind of now you're like struggling with, like, is this true? Is this not true? Is this fake news? Is it real news? Like, and going back to what Pablo said, is we don't have enough information. We don't know. Okay. And I don't, we will ever really know the ultimate truth of how COVID started and how it spread so quickly and how it changed from that something in a wet market that people are touching, like how it became airborne, like all of these different things. But my question is, does it matter?
No.
If we need to take care of ourselves because COVID exists now, does it matter that it originated in this village in China? Or is that rather than like the United States conspiracy of putting this virus in China? But the way we get fed information, I believe, is to reinforce stereotypes that we already have about negative stereotypes in particular, that we already have like planted way deep in our minds about various groups of people. And this particular stereotype reinforces the dirty Chinese, the like weird food thing, all of this different thing. And even the laboratory thing is like, oh, they're so smart, they're developing a biological weapon, but it got out of control. Like all of these things, like where we think about, what does it really do? What does it do? And what I think it does is reinforce the stereotypes that we've already been fed.
Yeah.
Gabi.
Yeah, thank you. Hi everyone. My first comment is that I share that what the other participants have said about, I think that Asian people are disciplined and respectful and smart, and so I share this stereotype. The second one is that when COVID, when they say that COVID came from China, and that I also thought, like Pablo said, that the relationship with the animals, and they eat all kind of animals, and I was mad because I mean they are eating the poor pangolin and or the bat or whatever, because I had read this thing about also the Yulin festival. It's a festival where they eat dogs, and I was like remembering all this. But then, as you said, I thought about, Mexico is not also so kind with animals. For example, we have Mercado de Sonora, and what if some disease could happen there, and as you said, then it was the Mexican virus and all this. And also I remember that H1N1 flu was originated here in Mexico. So then my second thoughts were different. And the third comment, it was about that. Now that you asked about stereotypes and what misconception Mexicans have, I thought about 3 Mexican sayings that I don't know where they originated from, but we have things or sayings like me quedé mirando como chino, or cobrarse a lo chino, or me engañaron como un chino. And I was thinking about that, and where what are the origins of these sayings, because I have used them and I have heard them, but I have never asked myself about the origins. And obviously, I mean, there are stereotypes that originated these sayings, and that's it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. I don't know those sayings. Like I've heard some Mexican sayings about like comparing indigenous to blacks and stuff, but I've never heard the negative Asian or Chinese sayings kind of thing. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because, you know, it just kind of shows us where, you know, like we have, and I love how you, like many of you have these like two really opposite ideas of Asian or Chinese in particular, right? That it's like, wow, this great super culture, and like, ooh, yuck, like, you know, how could they do these things kind of thing. And it's like, you know, it's like those are the two stereotypes that we have. And there's kind of no humanity inside of that. It's like people are fallible, people are great, people are kind, and people are, you know, not kind, you know. It's just, we have all kinds. Okay, Eric, you're up next.
Hey, Jagal. Hey, everybody. I think it's very difficult sometimes, because when I know that many times when people think in people in Latin America, instantly think in Mexicans, but there's another countries. I mean, is Argentina, is Salvador, is another countries, and I think that when we said Asian people, we are just thinking in people from Japan or from China, and there's another countries too, and I think that countries like Myanmar, for instance, so people who come from Jakarta, that looks or could look as an Asian people, or what we think is an Asian people, suffers from racism and that kind of things too. And we are trying to accept certain things, and sometimes it's very difficult when we think that they have some great values or something like that, we can feel insulted if someone said, for instance, you look like a Chinese, or you're like a Japanese. I think that is we don't think immediately in the good values and the great culture and the way they eat, and we feel that kind of commentary as an insult, and it's a kind of red flag for me, because for these commentaries and our thoughts are fed by sometimes by the media, and when we saw on the TV that the outbreak could be in China, immediately we tagged the Chinese people, and I need to accept that. For instance, and that's a year ago, maybe, if I go in the public transport, if I were in the public transport, and Asian people come and sit next to me, I feel afraid. I must accept that. For my mind, immediately I thought that something like, oh my gosh, is this dangerous? And I have these thoughts in my mind too, that the Chinese is a great culture, but there are very dirty people, and they eat something very strange. But for instance, here in Mexico, we have these tacos de tripa, and when I saw a TV show like 2 years ago, and they call it tacos de intestino, for me was like, it's not tacos de intestino, it's tacos de tripa.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Yeah, it's totally different. Tripa is not intestino. But suddenly I figured out is just for the language, but
Right.
it's taco intestino.
Yeah.
We're eating the intestino of something. And I think that for this exercise is very good for us because
Yeah.
we're trying to figure out how is real in us and how is like a kind of see that, for instance, many of us we don't know a real Chinese family, like
Mhm.
to point that they are dirty people.
Right. Exactly. Right.
We hear it in some place, but we don't know many Chinese people or many Japanese people to say that they are very smart, they're dirty,
Right.
and but we act immediately and we tag the people for good or for bad in that way.
Right. It's very true. I want to. You hit on so many things. One of the things you said, you mentioned Miramar, and you know, I think that this is so important because, and maybe we need to change how we're talking about this subject, because when I talk about because we're in Mexico and because we're talking about racism in Mexico, I talk about Mexican people and the mestizo culture and the mestizo identity, and we don't really talk about other parts of Latin America, right? We just talk about Mexico because we're here. But I don't compare you guys to people from Argentina or people from Guatemala, people from El Salvador. You know, it's like, I don't do that, and we don't do that because we're here and we're all, you know, talking about it, right? But maybe we should talk about like other racisms in Latin America and talk about different countries and how Mexico thinks about other Latin American countries, right? And maybe that will make it easier the next time I do this discussion, that we break down what this idea of Asia is, right? Because it's like, you know, big concept, we think in China, but you know, there's so many sushi places in Mexico. You know, Japan has to come into the picture. There's a huge Korean culture in Mexico that we could talk about. And there's all these tiny little countries that we never talk about. And Myanmar is one of them, right? And I think it's important because, Eric, I don't know if I can call you out here, but you practice Buddhism, right? Yeah. And so like, as a person, as a Mexican who practices Buddhism, you still carry these like, you know, like anti-Asian thinking in your head. Like that's, you know, that's amazing to us, right? That's amazing to me. And yet we think, and I'm going to talk about me too, in general, when we think about Buddhism and Taoism and all these like Asian religions or spiritual practices, we tend to think of them as like these good things, these advanced things, these amazing things, this like advanced cultures. And yet, do you guys know what's happening in Myanmar?
No.
The human rights violations that are happening in Myanmar, a Buddhist country, against Muslim people? Do you know that when India, you know, like, and we haven't talked about India at all, and we talk about Asia, India gets forgotten, but India is a huge part of Asia, right? Which is a completely different culture. But also there, it's like when India divided and, you know, became Pakistan as well, the Hindu population separated from the Muslim population. Like all of these different divisions happen. And so it's like Asian culture is not just one thing. Asian culture is not just good or bad or, you know, dirty or clean or smart or dumb or poor or rich or whatever. It's all of these different things because it has a million billion people in it, right? Like, I'm sorry, like there's just, so it's like, it's interesting that you say this, and I'd like to kind of challenge myself to think like the next time how I frame and how we talk about Latin America and Mexican culture and discrimination against Latin American people, you know, like so that we can kind of suss out some of those things that we're thinking about when we try to tease out discrimination against Asian people. Dulce.
Thank you. Well, I have many comments, but some of them are more or less the same. That yeah, what is her name? I think she's not here anymore. But well, yes, Gabby. Sorry, Gabby. That, for example, we also have these sayings such as "es que es chino" or "trabajo de chinos," no, in products with bad quality. And this is also a stereotype, no? That no, you don't have to buy this kind of product because they are Chinese or they are bad, no? And it's not about the nationality. I think it's about how government and how the economy has improved, no? Globally, that is this huge country that is China. And also is related with the human rights there, no? And how is their vision? We know that it's obviously don't have this West conception of human rights, but they have a very many problems with, for example, labor rights or woman rights. No, there is a lot of inequality there. So it's a reflejo of that
Reflection.
when we thank you, a reflection of that when we have that kind of products. So it's very sad. Also, I think that we have been racist against Asian people with these thoughts of, oh, they smell as like a soya, for example, or as Gabby said, no, they eat dogs and they kill seals, and it's awful. But we don't care if we in Mexico, if we have 10 woman death every day, no? It's like
Right. Right. So they kill dogs. Okay, Mexico kills women. What's the difference? I mean, like,
exactly.
Let's compare, right?
Exactly. And well, other thing is that we usually say that Japanese beauty or Chinese beauty is awesome because their skin is perfect, and it's the same with Afro-descendientes or Afro-Mexicanos, because we say, no, your hair is awesome, can I touch it? And it's the same with Asian people with their skin or how they are always fit, no? And that kind of things, it's our stereotypes, and also is, I think, no, of course, that is very molesto para ellos.
I would say offensive.
It could be
a
noise, could be.
Yes, thank you. It's offensive, no, for them also, because it's like, why you are touching my hair, or why are you always asking for my skin, no?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. And the last thought is that, for example, in South Asia, as Eric said, well, it's a mix, I think, an incredible mix of this. They are Asians, but also they have this mix of religions, no? That is awesome. But what happened when, and I don't know, people from Jakarta that is Asian, but he or she is Muslim, and then he or she traveled to United States, and it's like, oh, you're not Chinese, you're from Jakarta, Indonesia, how? And you're Muslim? It's like, no, because we have this idea of, no, China is all Asia. So, well, that's kind of thoughts that I have.
Thanks, Dulce. It just reinforces my idea that I need to break down kind of how we talk about Asia, because we just get stuck in talking about China when we talk about Asia. But there are a lot of And that's why I actually, next week will be our talk about Muslim, like Muslims, and I'm going to ask that our next hour, we focus on India and think about India and Hindu and things like that, so that we can kind of understand that India is part of Asia and what are our stereotypes there, or misinformation or lack of information that we get. One of the things you said that I want to really highlight is about this idea of Asian women, not Asian men, being this like beautiful, like sexy, these petite things. Wow, and this is from colonization and a lot of the wars that the military men would hook up with Asian women, and a lot of times the Asian women were actually trained to kind of be that person. And now it has carried over. There's this video, it's so intense, it's about like, I think it's called Our Asian Men Sexy. But one of the things it does is it talks about how Asian women get comments about their sexuality, and the whole like, slanted eyes kind of thing, get actually to the point of somebody asking them if they're slanted down there. Like, can you imagine? Like the audacity of somebody saying, like, how rude, like that's just like, offensive and rude. Like, how can you ask somebody about their private parts and think it's going to be okay? Like, what, sorry, some things just are just like outrageous, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Lillian, you're going to be our last speaker on this particular topic, and then we're going to try to switch, if we can, into Asia as regarding India, okay?
Okay. Just while you were talking about the India, I recall another film that is called it is in Netflix, that the film is the India's Daughters, which is talking about again the way that it seems the women's over the Indians culture. So it's kind of amazing. This is disturbing. I believe that is the war. And while we are talking about the differences, the Asians, the India, the China, the Japanese, and then I turn to the Latin American, and I start thinking about that we have missed the Argentine and the other cultures. That told me, and that's made me think that we are just thinking about ourselves almost in the neighborhood that we live, because it's a pity that we are not looking more than the other cultures, right? How they like to be called, how that they bother that we talk about their culture, even though the futures of their self. I mean, the skin color that we were talking about, and that kind of funny. Let me say that we are living in a multicultural world, and globalization, and all the communication and all the information in our hands, cell phone, yes, in a cell phone, and we are at the same time just in our very tiny street, or colony or town. I don't know if you got what I'm trying to say.
Not exactly.
That is fun. I believe that this amazed that we have a lot of information, a lot of the way to get in touch or know the other cultures. And right now, talking about the differences, cultures and words, just realize how wide and how big is our world. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. Even though right now we were talking about the Asian and we miss the Indian and the other countries, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, like, I'll take the responsibility for that, because that was me setting up, like, you know, like, because like I said from the beginning, like, when I did this a year ago, the group was like, oh, we don't really need to talk about Asian discrimination. Like, is that even a thing? And I was like, well, what if we think about it in terms of like COVID? And then it became like, oh, wait, yeah. But now that I'm doing this, you know, a year later, I think that there's a more subtle way that I can do this. And I think that what Eric said, like, you know, and it makes me think about all the ways that I have missed Latin America, you know, and how we focus on Mexico and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm gonna tweak it a little bit the next time I do it. But that'll be in. So there you go.
Okay.
Oh, you said something else that I wanted to grab out. No, I think that's everything for now. Danielle.
Hello, everyone.
Hey.
To me, the reasons in ASEAN is explained by the colonial and capitalist system. India is an example of the labor exploitation, and China is an example of the colonization. No? To me, this problem cannot be understood if we don't have this in mind. To me, the Westerners, we don't know what happened in Asia, in the world. And to me, this is the big problem. So I think that the Asia is an important place in the world because the capital system have many interests in this place. Yes, to me is this the question.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, for sure. You know, like, and all of this, a lot of this starts, you know, and when we talk about race, like, Asian is not a race, right? Like, we talk about it like it is a race, but it goes back to that whole concept of colonization and how biological racism was set up to be yellow equals this one continent area, you know, black equals this, you know, red equals that, and white equals this, and then brown came about because, you know, Latin America, especially Mexico, decided to be a mixed mestizo culture. But so you're totally right. Like, it comes from this whole concept and long history of colonization, and how especially white Europeans designated the other, right? David.
Thank you. I was reading about discrimination, racism with Mexicans to Chinese people in the 19th century in the north part of Mexico, and but even nowadays, even for many people, is common because I think the lack of information is difficult to most of the Mexicans to identify the nationality of Asian people. For us in general are almost the same. the Japanese and Chinese, and Mongolian, Philippines. So I have an experience to went to China. I went to Taiwan like 3 years ago, and for me was very interesting to know the other view of the world, not in the sense of from the Western or the Christian paradigm
perspective
or perspective. Yeah, it's totally different to analyze since the Buddhism or Taoism or Confucianism perspective. And for example, in Taiwan, for me, it's like a Mexican. Well, I just identify one race or one phenotype in Taiwan, but they explain me that no, the most of the Taiwanese people came from Han. The Han is like a race from China, continental China, but there are a few people, the local or the native indigenous of the island of Taiwan, that they belongs to other family. They are like Polynesians, tribes or ethnics, and this is the traditional or the original Taiwan people of the island. So, but most of the people who live in Taiwan are not from this tribe or ethnics. Most of them are from the Han tribe of Chinese mainland. So this is one example. I think most of us in Mexico, we have not the complete information about China or Asian people, and that is the reason we think that there are extremes or exotics or difference. Or I think that we need to know more about of them in order to avoid the stereotypes.
Very, very, very true, David. And so again, I'm going to talk about religion, right? So in the United States, right, we're supposedly a nation basically of Christians. But there, in my experience, there are people who like go to church Christians, and there are those who celebrate Christmas and Easter, like, get together with the family, and they never go to church Christians, okay? What I would call cultural Christians, and I'm going to write this, cultural Christian. And everybody else, Catholics, Muslims, Hindu, Buddhists, Taoists, whatever religion other than Christian you are super religious, right? They're just religious. And yet, coming to Mexico, the country is Catholic, right? And there's tons of Mexicans who don't go to Mass, who only celebrate Catholicism on Christmas, like who only do like this little thing for Easter or Day of the Dead. It's like, so how Catholic really are they? They're culturally Catholic, right? They're not religiously Catholic. Oh, I forgot to say Jewish, but everybody else is like super religious. And then, like when we had a lot of influx of Muslims into the United States, and so I had friends, like I had like actual Muslim friends from Somalia, and we would talk about this, right? And my friend she was religious, she would wear the hijab and stuff in the United States, told me that in her country, in Somalia, she was not religious at all. She like never wear the hijab, You know, she had like an office job, she dyed her hair, you know, like all of these different things that, like, for me, it was like, whoa, you know, like you are culturally Muslim, right? And we tend to think about like, oh, you know, all of those Asians are Buddhist and they're so like da 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 da, but there's plenty of people who have culturally Buddhist and they do not practice any form of like actual day-to-day Buddhism. They're only culturally Buddhist, right? So it's like all of these conceptions that we have, and like what you say, like all of these different phenotypes that they have, is very, 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 very interesting to me. And I think that you have like, you know, a lot to say. Pablo, give me 1 second. I want to check if Beatrice, do you want to say anything? Not yet?
Not right now, but in a minute.
Okay. Itzel, do you want to say anything?
About religion?
About Asian cultures, about how we're talking about this topic of anti-Asian discrimination.
Okay. I will say how do you say aislar por la religión.
Is the isolated for the religion? Islar? What's Islar? Am I getting that right?
Okay. I know some stories about some people that were isolated from others for their religion, and now I see the problem. I belong to a group of people that believes in other gods. I don't believe in nothing because I understand God in another idea, but they are isolated by the Catholic Church now, and I saw the culture of this group, and I saw many things, many beautiful things than the Catholic Church, but they don't recognize this religion, but it's too beautiful for me. And now I saw the Catholics and say they don't live fine because they don't see the beautiful things of life, and they always live in fear and without love, and they isolate another religions for these reasons. For me,
yeah, it's very interesting, right? How, even so. Next week we'll talk a little bit more about this because I think it's really interesting. How we still have these stereotypes about various religion and who might go to hell and who might get to go to heaven, right? Or wherever the concepts are, or if they don't believe in hell or heaven, what does that mean? Like, if they don't even believe in hell or heaven, according to their spiritual religion, I think in my framework of religion that they're going to go to hell. So it's like, it's really weird. It's really interesting. This is like a big, huge topic. So Beatriz, you're next, and then I'll go to Pablo and Sergio.
Hello, everyone. Well, I thought a lot about the question during the week, and I want to share a story that happened to me that it's similar to Eric. That when the pandemic started, I start to thinking about the Asian people like dangerous people. Like I was, but it was unconscious because one time I was walking over the street and then I saw a pair of Chinese people. I don't know if they were Chinese, but they were like with the eyes flat, and I thought that they were Chinese, and then I crossed the street to the other side, and then I realized that that was super racist, and that was an error or a mistake, because I didn't know nothing about them, and even I didn't know if they had COVID or not, or nothing, and I just act like they were a problem. The other thing that is related with your last question about Muslim and India, I think that one thing is that when we think about Asian people, we don't think about Indian people, because Indian people is like, it's not part of the stereotype, because they so different from Chinese or Japanese. I mean, in the characteristics of the body, because in the history of their country they are similar, but in the characteristics or the characteristic of their body are different. So when we think about Asian, they don't appear. So I think that it's a big mistake, because they are part of Asia. And I read recently about them, about their problems with Muslims and Buddhists, and I think that it's a huge mistake from there because there is a lot of violence in that country because of that, and I read that they hate Gandhi, and they have a lot of violence act against Gandhi fans or against Gandhi people. I don't know. Gandhi is not a religion, but it's an image, and I don't know how to say the people that follows Gandhi or the ideas of Gandhi, and I think that was a really interesting thing. And the other thing, and the last, is that I have a cousin-in-law that is from Iran, and when I said something like, I don't know, I don't want to go to your country because I don't want to use the thing that use the women, and he laughed at me, and he said, "No, what are you talking about? You don't need to use that if you don't want. It's only if you want, and only few people, only few women use it." So I said, "Oh, okay. In that case, maybe I will thinking if I go to your country." But yeah, that's all.
One of my best friends is from Iran, actually, and she's Muslim, and she does wear the hijab when she goes back, because yeah, some women don't wear it, but culturally it's the norm, and it's very uncomfortable. It would be like a Mexican woman wearing shorty shorts, around town. Like, it's just not, yeah, you can do it, but it's not really done, right? Pablo.
Yes, I just want to ask something. I was at an exhibition at the Museo de Antropología y Historia, and I took pictures of works representing mestizos, negros, indigenous in Mexico from the colonial age to our age. I put it in.
Hold on. You took photos?
Yes, of the work.
Oh, okay. Like it wasn't your work. You went and saw somebody's work.
Yes. No. These are plastic art pieces.
Right, but it wasn't your art.
No, not mine.
Okay. I thought it was your art first.
No.
I'm sorry. Continue with your story.
I just took photos and I put it in a PowerPoint, and I want to send to all the fellows because they are very interesting. I was thinking about what we talked from mestizos, indígenas, etc. Can I send you to your email, Jack, and you resend to the rest of the people?
Let me screen it first. I'll look at it and then I'll decide. Okay.
Sure.
Sometimes I think things are kind of iffy and I don't want to. Let me review it. But yeah, sure. Send it to me and I'll look at it.
Okay. Thank you.
Sergio.
Real quick, first, please allow me to share, to say some another story we may share regarding the Asian people. We tend to believe that everyone knows martial arts, right? And no, to say that we don't wear a mariachi hat or sing the cucaracha all the day. It's the same. And I think that when we interact with another culture, some other cultures, we have this enrichment with because the exchange of culture happens, right? So I could say that, for instance, maybe Netflix, right? Thanks to the Squid Game, now I can say a couple of things in Korean. I could say "Jaka Chokchirmo," for instance, right?
How dare you?
Sorry?
How dare you? How dare you talk to me like that? I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, and addressing the point to India, I had the opportunity to go to India. I went like 15 years ago. It's a magical country. We all believe that it's a spiritual country, and I think it is. There are plenty of temples. It's a temple in every corner, and they're Hindus, right? But they also have some Catholic churches, and that was a little bit strange to me because it was like the cool thing, like the rich teenagers went to the Catholic church.
Oh wow!
Okay, yeah, there's a lot of poverty, and that country is like being in another planet. Once you get off the plane, you get hit by this spicy environment, which is rich. I love it. This to me is the best in the world. It's so spicy, so rich, so diverse, and
I'm hungry.
But I would say that you don't get to interact a lot of Indian persons. And I had the opportunity, right?
You mean here in Mexico, or you didn't in India?
In Mexico.
Okay.
Mexico. I had that opportunity to interact with some Indian guys because I work in HSBC a lot of years. So there were teams that were coming back and forth from India to Mexico, and yeah, I got to get along with them. And I would say that I don't think they're discriminated. Maybe some person would make fun of their accent because they speak English, but they have this very different accent. It may be difficult to understand it sometimes. But I don't see him like discriminated in my experience.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Like what the lines are that we draw individually about what is a stereotype, what is discriminatory and things like that. And I would say, yes, I would say that they're for sure discriminated against, especially because like in my experience with Indian culture, the stereotype is the tech person, right? Like, the IT person, is going to be Indian, and that's the culture that they develop. And what I have learned is that they might have like a whole business of, Indian IT people, but they can only go so far. And then upper management are Europeans or white people, Americans or Europeans. And they say, it's because that the Indian culture doesn't have what it takes to be the boss. And so like there's this stereotype that adds to their discrimination in being able to get promoted in work. That is a form of discrimination, right? This stereotype misconception that an Indian person could not be a good boss. Maricela.
When I was looking for information about Asian people, it was an article which called my attention because sometimes we don't know how we can consciously or unconsciously affect other people. It was because I read that parents are seriously thinking about the language that their children have to learn, because obviously at the schools, is not allowed speaking Chinese Mandarin, and that's why I think we affect them, because I think it is part of them, their identity. Mm-hmm. So imagine, we don't know how can we hurt people, sometimes by our bullying, our comments. Mm-hmm. For example, I recognize that in my family, it is a culture to finish the events playing cards. And at the end, when there is a huge amount of money, can I say that? Mm-hmm. A huge amount of money.
Are you playing poker?
Yes.
Okay. It's
open
called
poker.
A pot. It's called a pot of money.
Pot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, all of us want to win. And at the morning when it is the last card, or the person is given the last card, we do this act. Because do you remember the cat? It's a Chinese icon, I think. And that it is a cat which moves his because it's for good luck. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it is kind of bullying, but yes. Mm-hmm. So, but at the end we laugh at their culture. It is unconsciously, but at the end it happens. So that's all my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, the ways that we do things, and going back to what Sergio said about, like, I don't know if it's discrimination. Is bullying discrimination? Is making fun of the way somebody talks, like I've seen movies where the person is like making fun of an Asian person and they're like, or whatever. And then it's like, or saying something like, see, what did I just say? Tell me what I just said, kind of thing. Is that discrimination, or what is that? It's racist, I mean, for sure, but how does that play into, discrimination, stereotypes, things like that, right? It's Japanese, it's called India. Let's talk about India, because, I think Sergio is correct. There's a lot more. I want to say something else too, because it reminded me of something that Pablo said. Can we know a culture through eating their food? At restaurants, in our own country, or like me in Mexico? Can I know Japanese culture through eating sushi in Mexico? And the other thing I would think is, when we don't have access to information, like if we don't know people, like there are Indian food places here that I love to death because I love Indian food. But I do not know very many, I don't know any Indian heritage people from India here in Mexico. I do not one. So like what do we do with that? Oscar.
Mm-hmm. What it comes to my mind when I think about India, I think the in the cartoon, the Simpsons, this I put
the 7-Eleven guy. Yeah,
no,
is exactly right.
In Los Simpsons cartoon, the
like he works at the OXXO.
Brano, he calls Apu in Spanish.
Apu.
This is in but I think it's a stereotype that with Chinese, they are really committed, and he's always committed to his store, and he never holidays or nothing, and they had a strong accent that is something that you and that's what I think about it. But I don't think they are they are right. No,
they're the majority are Hindu. When India became what's the term after colonization, when they
independent?
Independent, thank you. When they became independent, the Muslim, they kind of had a fight in parliament with the Pakistan, with the Muslims versus the people who wanted to follow Gandhi, and which would be the Hindu way, right? And so they separated. They became two states, two nations: Pakistan, which had the Muslim population, and India, which had housed the Hindu population. So that's kind of a tiny bit of the history that I know. And for me, and I'll say again, like like when I think of Indians from India, I think of or Hindus from India. I'll say I think mostly in IT tech positions, but I also think in my American mind and my American stereotypes of 7-Eleven owners, like especially in Black neighborhoods. So it's Korean or Indian who buy these little, tiendas in these neighborhoods and, sell their products in Black neighborhoods typically. It's either Korean or Hindu. That's the stereotype. Mm-hmm. And if you see Black movies, like by Black film producers, that will be shown in the movies. Like they'll show you the Asian people that are the owners. The other thing that they do is drive a taxi. Oh. That's the big stereotypes, right? Those are the 3 jobs that you were allowed to have, right? It doesn't matter if you came over and you were a doctor in your country. You can be a 7-Eleven owner, a taxi driver, or an IT person. Period. That's it. Okay, Eric.
Yeah, well, when I think in India and the misconceptions I think that we have about, I think that we have these stereotypes of the taxi driver, sometimes as the food. Nowadays, maybe we think in India with these Bollywood movies.
Bollywood, yeah, Bollywood, of course.
And the dances and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I think this is a very rich. I think this is a very rich country, but with a lot of issues too, with this strong division by the religion. As you said, with Pakistan, when they divided, was by the religion. I think the Muslim people wanted to have their own piece of land, and I think that is what was very, if we think about it, is very strong how the people was divided by religion. Is how here in Mexico the Catholics were just the owners of the half of the country, and the other half was for the other religions. And I want to say something too, that part of the misconceptions that we have is they had a strong accent. Yeah, they have an accent, but we have it too. When we speak another language, we have. I mean, I'm trying to get into some platforms as VO, as voiceover in the States, and when they think about the accent, they say that neutral accent, or they have an accent for Mexico. I think in the US, they think that we have an accent when we speak, as Salma Hayek, for instance. And I think that is something that we have to try to realize, that many of us have an accent.
Yeah.
When we speak another language.
Well, even if we speak our own language, right? I mean, you guys don't speak like those people from Chihuahua, or or from Chiapas, Oaxaca. If you Jalisco, Guerrero, Veracruz, Yucatan. Like there are so many different accents in Mexico, just like there are so many accents in the United States. And a lot of places in India, they do have their own indigenous languages, but they speak English. And so it's like, oh, they speak English with this weird, funny accent. Well, have you ever been to Australia? Like, I'm sorry, or even Britain. For me, like a lot of places, they have, a weird English accent. Or even sometimes people from the South or people from other English-speaking parts of the United States have extremely weird accents and they're native English speakers, right? So you're totally right. Okay, Beatriz. You're on mute.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is that I haven't met an Indian person. That's the thing. But I am a fan, or I am following the work of two Indian people. The first one is a comedian, and he's an Indian American, and he is Hassan Minhaj. And he's very funny, and he has a program in Netflix, and the position, his political position, it's relatable to me, because I'm his, like the same. I am the same street, or I don't know how do you say, when there is a line that is right and left in politics, but I think that he is in the left, and I think that I am close to him in his political views. And he told he told a lot about Indian culture and the stereotypes about Indian people in America. And the one that I heard that and it's very funny because he's a comedian, but is the parents are very strict. And he said, well, that is a prejudice, but in my case is correct. No, my parents are very strict. And the second guy that I follow, and he's Indian, but he lives in England, is Pankaj Mishra, and he's an political science guy, and he wrote the book that I referred the last time, and I think that he's very brilliant, and he's not funny. He's very serious when in his words, but I really like his posture, his political aligned.
Politically aligned. You're politically aligned.
Aligned. Okay.
The G in there, but the G is silent, so it's politically aligned. So like that, like when you align like a line like this, it's actually one word, but it means similar. You're in the same path, basically.
Okay. Yeah, and he is very serious, and I think that he's one of the most interesting persons in the world about political science. And the last thing that I want to say is that when I went to California, I went to an Indian restaurant because I want to know their food, and this is their food, and this is related with your last question, and it was their food. It's very amazing. It's delicious, but the thing that amazed me was that they put a bottle of water in the center of the table. Not only a glass of water, a bottle of water. And I think, oh, this is super nice and this is comfortable. I don't need to ask for a glass of water. I just open the bottle and I serve me. So that is useful. And I think that this is a thing that all the cultures need to learn about this kind of food. And I think it's because their food is very spicy. But
yeah, maybe. I mean, that's funny coming from a Mexican that typically says, "Is it spicy?" and they say no, and like 5 minutes later you're like, oh.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a different kind of spice, right? Like there's all kinds of spicy. Do you know Homi Baba? Have you heard of Homi Baba? He's one of the things I know about Indian intellectual writers. Woof, it is hard. Like the way they have been taught in their university system, and then the way that they think, and then the way that they write, for me is like really difficult. Like I have my own university education, but like it's really complicated for me to I have to read it really slowly. Homi Baba is one of my favorites, though. He's really and it's really interesting because he talks about race and this kind of colonialization stuff. And one of the things that he says is that like most cultures that aren't like this European white culture, American culture, have a love-hate relationship with the white hierarchy, right? Because on the one hand, they don't want the oppression against their own culture, against their own foods, their own religions, their own way they dress or whatever. But on the other hand, they still want Coca-Cola, they still want the Starbucks kind of thing. So it's like where, these like fine lines between colonization and, self-colonization are just because I don't want to be colonized mentally doesn't mean I don't want Starbucks or something, So it's really interesting to read. His name is Homi Baba.
Sorry, yeah.
I think it's Homi Baba. I think it's with two. I think it's both BH, BH. BH, yeah. It's Homi Baba. Like that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he's smart. He's a smart guy. Do you guys know Foucault? Foucault. Anyways, I would associate him with like Foucault of India. He's that smart.
Cool.
I have to take off. Too, guys. I've got to get on this trip to Veracruz. Next week, let's talk about Muslim cultures. Let's talk about, different people from, and that's a lot of different people. We talk, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. You got a lot of different places in there. And so let's talk about Muslim cultures. Gabby, did you want to say something before we leave? What? Oh, okay. So we'll see you next week, Wednesday, not Tuesday, Wednesday. And I'll probably send it this weekend because I'm really busy right now, okay? But I'll think of something that we can look at, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jacob.
Thank you guys.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.